Attention sports enthusiasts, keep the adrenaline pumping and elevate your game day with Chumba Casino. It's completely free to play. No purchase necessary. Whether you're cheering from the stands, on the move, or relaxing at home, Chumba Casino brings the thrill of social casino directly to your fingertips. Experience the ultimate social casino adventure with reels of casino-style games, offering hundreds of exciting options to choose from and fresh new releases every week. There's always something new and thrilling to explore, from action-packed social slots and classic blackjack to engaging bingo and solitaire. The fun never stops. Plus, enjoy generous daily login bonuses and a fantastic free welcome bonus to kickstart your social gaming journey. Dive into the excitement. Discover a world where you can play for your chance to redeem some serious prizes and have a blast along the way. Don't miss out. What are you waiting for? Join now and immerse yourself in nonstop fun and adventure with Chumba Casino. Get in on the action today at ChumbaCasino.com and make every day a Chumba day. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus T&Cs apply.
Welcome to Radical Personal Finance, a show dedicated to providing you with the knowledge, skills, insight, and encouragement you need to live a rich and meaningful life now while building a plan for financial freedom in 10 years or less. My name is Joshua Sheets. I am your host, and on today's podcast, I am going to seek to persuade you that it is financially stupid for you to send your children to expensive private schools when compared with the alternative. And undoubtedly, after listening to today's podcast, you're going to continue to send your children to expensive private schools. But I think this is an interesting discussion to have. Why do we send our children to expensive schools? Well, of course, we want what's best for them. And there are various reasons why we would do that. But after all, most of us have access to tuition-free government schools. We can take our children, we can enroll them into a local government school, and they can, quote unquote, get an education. And yet many of us take our children out of that government school and we enroll them into a private school of some kind, paying thousands or tens of thousands of dollars of tuition payments in order for our children to be well educated. Now, we do that for many reasons. The basic one is simply that we want our children to be better off and we want to invest into our children. You can basically sell people anything at any price if it's for the children. And undoubtedly, many of us are thinking about that from a financial perspective. We're saying, how much, maybe if I spend money on my child's private school tuition, my child will have better opportunities in the world, better chance to move up in the world, and a lot of benefits in life. Well, a few months ago, I was listening to a podcast. I'm sorry that I can't remember who it was. I thought it was Brian Kaplan, then I looked him up and I was like, no, that's not who it was. But I was listening to a podcast, and the guest being interviewed on the podcast made the point, said, it's kind of silly that we rich people spend all kinds of money on private schools, because if they just took that tuition and invested into the stock market instead, then they would be all better off and the children would have a lot more money. After all, a normal private school tuition is $20,000 to $30,000 a year. And if you're investing that much money early in life, that's quite a lot of money. And I thought, what a fascinating concept. Maybe it's true. I wonder if it's true. And so I sat down and I built a little chart just to kind of see what the numbers would be. And let me tell you, the numbers are astonishing. It is astonishing what the alternative cost is. Now, before I actually give you the chart, let me just tell you how I got the numbers. I thought, well, obviously private schools can mean different things. There are many people who have private schools that are literally, $1,000 or $2,000 a year. And they've worked something out. And then, of course, there are very expensive, prestigious private schools that are hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. I think Le Rosey is the most expensive in the world. And I think if last I checked, it was almost $200,000 a year for tuition at Le Rosey in Switzerland. So we can have a huge variation in these numbers. But I decided, well, let me go back and just use my schools, because I graduated from private schools. Now, I didn't think of myself as, I still don't think of myself as kind of a bougie guy. On the contrary, I think that I'm kind of a man of the people. So I went back and I pulled up the tuition and fees for the school that I graduated from high school. And I about fell out of my chair. I hadn't checked it in a couple of years, and inflation is really kicking away with regard to private school tuition. So the school that I graduated from, when I was there, it was kind of just a normal, standard private Christian school. And for years, my parents we had homeschooled for a time, and then they took us all out of homeschool and they rolled us in government schools. And then that was their plan. They never intended to be kind of private school people, but they didn't want us to be homeschooled for all of our school career. But as we were all enrolled in different government schools, eventually the schools were getting so bad, and there was just flat out pornography in the classrooms, and the environment was so bad. Finally, they said, we can't do this. We can't do this to our children. And so they pulled all their children out, and they enrolled us into a local private Christian school. Now, they would never have been able to afford it, except that my mom got a job working at the school and was then entitled to a very handsome tuition rebate program, as is common in private schools. And so basically she worked for the cost of the schooling, and given that, then over time we were able to be enrolled in that school and to be able to afford it. That was how my family was able to afford it. But I don't recall what the tuition was, but it wasn't that much. But today it is. So I pulled up the tuition schedule for that school, which I consider to be, it's certainly a leading private school where I'm from in South Florida, but it's not the most hoity-toity. It's not super high level. It's just kind of a leading local private Christian school. So the tuition schedule for this school for kindergarten and first grade is $21,400. Second to fifth grade, $22,300. Sixth to eighth, $26,700. And ninth through 12th, $31,300. So for high school, $31,300 of annual tuition payments. Now, maybe they have scholarships. I don't know what all their options are, but that's a pretty healthy number, pretty substantial number. And so let's use those numbers. Then I went and I looked up and I said, wait a second, let's advance this out to college as well. What would it look like in the college years? Now, college is a little bit more questionable because, as always, colleges give out quite a lot of financial aid, and the actual retail tuition numbers that are listed on the website for a college is really very rarely does anybody actually pay that price. Very rarely does anyone pay that price, even at the most expensive schools. So, for example, the very expensive Ivy Leagues, they basically, most of them have a policy that if you're accepted, even though our retail tuition price is enormous, everyone's going to come even if you can't pay a dime. And so retail tuition prices should not be counted on at colleges. But I thought, let's do this example just to kind of see how it works out. So the college that I graduated from with my undergraduate degree now charges $20,500 of tuition per semester, or $41,000 per year. And that's not an unreasonable number. Now, here again, it was a lot cheaper when I was there, a lot cheaper. And of course, tuitions have grown with inflation and much higher than the rate of inflation. And I did not pay that. I paid for my school myself, but I did have some scholarships and a financial aid package from the college, and it worked out. I don't recall all the numbers, but it worked out okay, and it wasn't that much. But I said, well, let's just use the total amount. So they say $41,000 a year, $1,250 of fees, and then $14,290 of room and board for a direct cost of $56,540. So I said, let me do a little chart. Let's see what this turns out to. And so first thing I did, which I often do now, is I popped over to ChatGPT and I fed Chat this prompt. And I said, let's assume that instead of sending my children to a private school, I instead take this amount of tuition money and invest it into the stock market at 9%. How much money would I have in this child's account at age 40? And I use those tuition figures that I said, K through first of $21,400, going up to 9th through 12th, $31,300, 4 years of college tuition at $56,540. And then I said, after college, all contributions to the account end. And I told it to give me a chart and a table so I could see if it's doing things correctly. Well, Chat pops out a number for me of $7,463,118.68. And when I went and took a look at the chart, it seems perfectly appropriate in terms of the overall return. Now, that's assuming 9%, which is certainly aggressive. Usually, I would use 7% to be less aggressive, but I just thought, let's think about this. $7 million. $7 million at age 40. $7 million. Now, we could make these numbers conservative in any way that we want, right? We could use $20,000 per year for 12 years. And I went and did that one. I did it manually. And then I calculated, okay, college and whatnot. The point is that it winds up being millions of dollars, somewhere between $3 and $7 million, depending on the numbers that we choose. Could even be $10 million for some people if you're looking at a higher dollar tuition payment. $7 million. Now, here's the question. If you went to a school like I did, I attended my 20th high school reunion last year. And if I walk around that room, I'm going to do this at the next reunion. I should have done it. I wish I'd done it before this one. And I ask the people in that room and I say, listen, what would you rather have right now? You know, when you're 38 years old or almost 40, what would you rather have right now? Would you rather have your high school diploma from this school that you went to, or would you rather have $3 or $4 million in the bank? Which would you rather have? Or if I went to my college reunion and I had some friends that went to the same high school as me and same college as me, and I asked them, which would you rather have? Would you rather have your degrees from these institutions, or would you rather have $7 million in an investment account at the age of 40? I have a very hard time believing that a single person in that room would choose anything other than the $7 million. I mean, when you understand the value of $7 million, let's just say on the 4% rule, right? $7 million is $280,000 of income per year. You say, well, okay, you're doing that at age 40. Let's do more conservative. 3%, $210,000. I mean, for crying out loud, we could live on dividends for a couple $100,000 per year with just some dividend investments, and our accounts can sit there and still continue to grow. Does anybody get that value out of one of these schools? You say, well, Joshua, it's not all about the money. Of course it's not all about the money, but we got to think about the money. And I got to be honest, I may not be the most radical guy anymore, but this radicalized me a little bit. I've never jumped up and down on my soapbox and yelled against the cost of tuition. But when you look at the opportunity cost of the tuition and you think, what could we do with that money instead? I got to imagine that to the extent that we're calculating on expensive private school tuitions based upon our children doing financially better, this is a pretty serious hurdle to overcome. If instead you just send your children to the government school and over time take and invest that money instead. That's a pretty serious hurdle to overcome. We've got a lot to do to justify that. Now, let me, of course, address the fact that many people will justify it. Why do we justify it? Well, we justify it because we say, well, I want my children to be exposed to a certain social group. I would bet that there's probably somebody in one of my schools who's made connections based upon his or her social group at that school, kind of the elite of society, the hoity-toity people. I would bet that there's somebody who has more than a $7 million net worth at age 40 because of those connections. But it's got to be only one person or maybe two. Like, there's just not enough. It's not enough time for that to grow. And remember, the $7 million can continue to grow. That's just the tip of the iceberg. If I project forward what it would be at 80, I'll cry. And so if we look at the alternative cost, if we had the ability to invest it into, say, stocks, and if stocks continue to produce those handsome returns that I'm using, then basically the whole argument for the financial returns of school falls apart, and even the social dynamic. Well, I made the network, or I made the connections. I did these certain things. What about kind of formation? Well, I appreciate that, right? I think that I'm really happy with the social environment that I was in high school and college. I really value it. I don't know if I value it $7 million worth, but I made some good friends. It was some bad people were weeded out and some good people were there, but it certainly wasn't all across the board. It wasn't the most effective thing. So we got to really think about this and consider what are the alternatives. Now, I want to be quick to point out that just because this is the case, I'm not planning to enroll my children into government schools, because I think the government schools come with their own unique downfalls and unique problems. After all, you send your child to a government school and your child winds up, bullied and ends his life prematurely. Well, that's a big problem. And now you would have been better off paying the money for the private school if that was the tool of avoiding bullying, or any number of things that can happen. So it's not just a clear-cut opportunity, but doing this analysis definitely reinvigorated my own appreciation of basically independent education. Now, I have appreciated this for years, right? I have 5 children. I figure I didn't realize we're up to $30,000 a year. I always use $20,000 a year as kind of my number for private school. But I have 5 children, $20,000 a year. That's $100,000 of school expenses. When I look at what I can do in home education, I just figure, well, it's either this or $100,000. Those are my 2 options. I'm not going to put my children in government schools, so it's either this or $100,000. And so if I spend $20,000 or $30,000 in a year on some of this, some like high level stuff and tutors here and fancy stuff here, or come on, if I spend $50,000 in a year doing the world schooling stuff that I do and whatnot, I just figure I'm getting an amazing deal. And all of this is working out much better than it would if I were spending $100,000 a year on tuition payments. When I compare doing this stuff, which of course you can homeschool on the cheap, right? There are many people, you don't need anything other than what you can find for free at the library. Like you can literally spend $0 on education and get great results. After all, remember that last I saw, the unschoolers who engage in no formalized instructed curriculum outperform on academic outcomes. They outperform the government schools. Add in a little bit of motivation, a good environment, lots of library books, Khan Academy, all kinds of free stuff that's available online, and you can easily homeschool for free. But of course, most of us spend a few $1,000s a year per student just to make sure that we really have good stuff and are doing a good job. So we're not going to do it for free, but when I look at this, I'm much more motivated to say, I'm just not even the private schools that I think about. What's the point? Now, of course, I use the most aggressive form here. And even my thought on private schools has been that I think very naturally some version of home education is a really good natural fit for the early years. And I think where you start to get the real limitations of home education come in around the high school years. The big limitation of home education is quite simply that you can't reproduce the kinds of things that you can do with a big group of people in a homeschool. So you can't reproduce sports, team sports. You can't reproduce, musical theater, some of those things. And so being able to come and go and pick and choose from a big school and have a big environment really is helpful. And I think there really is value in having a strong group of peers and social connections that you build in your community through kind of just a standard academic model. But I think most of that is relevant in high school and college, not so much in the early years. In the early years, academically in schools and institutional schools are just basically a waste of time. So when you put a waste of time and a waste of money onto it, I think now we see a big price tag of that stuff. So you can play with these numbers, and I would encourage you, go ahead and run your own. I find I try to get people now, instead of teaching them how to run a financial calculator, I try to get people to use AI for this, because I find AI does a pretty good job, especially with some of these like slightly intricate things. It takes a while to teach people how to do a financial inflation adjustments on a financial calculator, but ChatGPT can do it pretty simply. So play around with some of these scenarios and calculate it for yourself. What if you stopped spending money on private school tuition and instead put the money in the stock market? What would it turn out to be for you? Now, I also point out, of course, that this is not the only option. And so I'm naturally biased in favor of home education because that's what I like and that's what my passion is, and I think it's great for a lot of people. But maybe it's not great for you. And so here we get to, what about, is it worth it to buy the $2 million house instead of the $1 million house in order to be in the fancy school district? Well, as your resident financial advisor, I'm going to tell you that basically, yeah, it is. Because if, let's say that there is a local government school that is very well funded, you're in Gary, Indiana, or something like that, where there's just this amazing thing, or some magnet school in Miami or New York, or one of the fancy schools that are across the country. and it's all government tuition paid, but you have to scrimp and save to buy the house in that school district. You should do that. Because if you can save yourself this $30,000 and instead put it into home equity, possibly in the form of a payment, or into the stock market, or into some alternative investment, you're probably going to turn out financially much better from this perspective. Don't also neglect the value of places that have various school choice programs. And so if you live in a state that has a voucher program, if you live in a state that has the opportunity to kind of dip your toe in the water in multiple ways, then that is really worth pursuing as compared to the only option we have is to go and spend $30,000 on private schools. And I appreciate, my state, Florida, is, I think, one of the best here. There are very few states in the United States that are better for home education than the state of Florida, because what homeschoolers in Florida can do is you can do homeschooling and independent study for everything that you want, and then everything where the school system is convenient, you can go and use that. So if you want your homeschooled student to go and take an art class at the local school because the art teacher is really great, and play football after school, or play musical theater or play in the band or something like that, you can just use the school system for everything that you want and then just not use it for anything that you don't want. It's fantastic. So recognize that there's lots of different ways for you to achieve your goals, lots of ways that you can mix and match. And if you've got the money and you're already saving money left, right, and center, and you just really love the school because it's a wonderful part of your lifestyle and your community and your worldview, and it really impacts the children and they've got their friends there and everything like that, money is made to be spent. And so I don't begrudge that at all. But to the extent that you are scrimping and saving like a crazy person to try to help your children to be financially successful, and that's the reason that you're spending all this money on this fancy private school, well, $7 million, bro. I think you're better off stopping and putting the money in the stock market. That's all I want to share with you today. Hope you enjoyed it. Remember that forgive the paucity of shows these days. I've been huffing and puffing, working on RPF Academy. It's going really well so far. I've got great feedback from the students, but that's just been taking my time. It will be really freeing up a little bit, and so we'll be having more podcasts per week coming soon here, probably in the middle to end of February as we get back to that. By the way, if you would like to join me at RPF Academy, it's not too late. If you would like 2025 or whatever year you're listening to this to be one of your best years, go to rpfacademy.com and sign up. I've been taking students there systematically through every aspect of financial planning. We're going to have a huge module on education planning, college planning, undergrad, high school planning, and all of this. And this will be a component of that course. Basically, if you listen to the podcasts and you find value out of just kind of the random things that come up randomly in your podcast feed, and you say, well, wouldn't it be great if Joshua sat down and organized all this stuff in a step-by-step way? That's what RPF Academy is. You can listen to thousands of hours of the show, and you can get probably everything I'll say in the Academy for free. I mean, I don't think I have that many original ideas in the Academy. Might be a few that I've saved for there, but most of it's available for free on the podcast. But if instead of listening to thousands of hours, you just like to get straight to the answers, go to rpfacademy.com and sign up there. rpfacademy.com. Thank you so much.
Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience and their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's Libsyn, ads.com today.